In this video, I want to go through the features of the Houdini node that I made called Save Unreal Geometry. The idea is that we can use Houdini engine, send static meshes from content browser to Houdini, and then save them easily and in the streamlined fashion to the disk. So let's go ahead and start the typical workflow with this node. So first of all, you're going to need some assets. So I have went ahead and downloaded some of the asset packs that I have on Fab. In this case, I have some like garden tools asset pack. You can see there's a bunch of static meshes. So let's go ahead and send them to the Houdini. So make sure you have your Houdini engine installed. And I'm going to go ahead and say, just select them all, and let's go ahead and send it to Houdini. This should open up a new instance of Houdini, and then we are going to start using the Save Unreal Geometry node. So you can see it starts to populate all the meshes, and we have loaded all of them. You can see, and all of these meshes are going to be placed in the Unreal Content subnetwork. If you go ahead and open it up, you can see each one of these static meshes has their own geometry subnetwork. So we do not have to go any deeper. The node is actually going to be instantiated from the object level. And then just go ahead and put down Save Unreal Geometry node. So just go ahead and by default, the node expects that you connect your Unreal content node to the first input of the geometry, of the Save Unreal Geometry node. And by default, everything should be set up and you can already save all of the geometry. So the most basic setup would be, since this uses a PDG graph, we need to create our static work items. You can press on generate static work items. You can see we have each one of these dots represent a single file, a single static mesh. If you go ahead and press on it, you can see there's a bunch of data about it. The most important part is the piece value attribute. A piece value attribute, which is basically the static mesh name inside the content browser that we're going to use later on to extract data from it. And all of these are basically, everything else is not really all that interesting for us. So what I want to do is go ahead and save this geometry. So what I have here, I have one directory that I want to save my geometry in. I'm going to go ahead and say my output directory is going to be this one. And subdirectory you can leave empty since I do not have a subdirectory here that I want to save from the output directory. So basically the idea is that we can point to our main directory, and if we have any subdirectory in it, this drop-down menu would populate it, but you can see in this case we do not have. Let's go ahead and you can go ahead and press cook output node. You can see start to cook. And if you go ahead and take a look at this directory where we saved them, you can see all the files, all the meshes are being saved on disk. And they should be done. And let's go ahead and put down like a file node. And let's try to open up one of these files. Let's go here and open up this one. Like see, we have all of our geometry loaded in. And we have all these useful Unreal attributes that we can use later on. So that's the basic idea how to save all of this geometry. So it's very straightforward. Import it inside here, connect your Unreal content, and that's it. And let's go ahead and do a little bit more of advanced setup where we extract some data from the static meshes. So the idea is that we can extract data from these static meshes and use them as a value that's going to point to the different directories from here. So in this case, this geometry has been very nicely named, because you can see that, let's say for these pods, you can see that there's a prefix SM, which is very common, basically kind of like a standard naming scheme for the static mesh inside Unreal. Then there is a name of the garden set, and then there's ID for this unique piece. You can tell that this middle name is basically kind of like a type of the item that is in this garden shed asset pack. So what we can do is extract this middle name and use it as a directory where we want to save them. So that means we would have multiple directories with the similarly themed objects inside it. So let's go ahead and try it out, how to set it up. So this actually uses the regular expressions. That's regular expressions, which is basically the extract data tab directory. So what you could do is go ahead and say extract data, and basically it's going to extract this data from the piece value attribute, which is the static mesh, basically the static mesh name inside the content browser. We have to apply our regular expression, and by default it's a simple regular expression that basically matches entirety of the static mesh name inside content browser as its own attribute. So in this case, if we would generate our core work items, we would have an attribute name that we could use for the file name and subdirectory dynamic naming for these part of for each cook item. But since we want to do a little bit more of an advanced setup, what we have to do is we have to use the second kind of like a preset regular expression, which uses the prefix, basically which separates the static mesh name in content browser by first and the last underscore. And if you go ahead and open up regex 101, I have pasted this regular expression, and I have pasted some of the static mesh names inside as a test string. You can see I'm not going to talk much about regular expressions because I have talked about them in many different videos, but the basic idea is that it's more advanced wildcards that Houdini comes with. Wildcards like for the groups and all of these. And we have basically gotten 3 different groups that we can use. We have group prefix, common name, and suffix. And all of these are taken from the first and the last underscore of the geometry. You can see it even has been colored in different colors. You can see so this is why the regex 101 is so amazing, that it's basically breaks down the entire regular expression and tells what has been matched. And since we know this is going to work, we have now common name attribute that we can reference as a PDG attribute for these parameters. And I want to use my common name attribute as a subdirectory value. So I'm going to go ahead and say I will copy this piece value as a file name. I'm going to use as a, instead of piece value, I'm going to call this common name. And now we have already set up our saving to be in different directories. But to visualize how many directories you want to get, what you can do is go ahead and put down the same attribute without the p prefix as a partition attribute for this is just for the visualization of the work items for these dots. If you go ahead and say dirty all and generate static work items, you can see in this case we have only 8 work items, and we have basically got all of these static meshes. And one thing that I'm not sure why it has been changed, in the previous Houdini versions there actually was a really nice array viewing kind of array. Basically when you have multiple files you could easily see them as an array, but it seems like in the new update they have changed the output. But basically you can see this is a PDG output files, and this says that 24 files are going to be saved in this directory. You can take a look at the rest of them. Some of these, let's take a look at maybe this one, 15 files, 12, 8, and all of these. So that's very useful. So as you do is go ahead and let me go ahead and delete all of these files because I want to recook them. Cook output node. And you can see in this case, since we have set up our subdirectory, we have saved them in different directories. Let's go ahead and let's try to take a look at them. So this is where my file scrubber node comes in very handy because we can scrub through the individual folder content. So in this case, let's go to the farming machine. So you can see there's only one mesh for this. For farming tools, you can see basically the same similar themed items has been saved in the same directory. And one last thing that I want to talk about is writing the tag attribute. So the idea is that we can write the tag for this for all the geometry that has been saved as a detail attribute. So let's say I want to remember where I saved this geometry from. I want to maybe save the asset pack's name for this geometry that's going to be stored on disk. So what you can do is go ahead and say write tag attribute. I'm going to call this asset pack. I'm just going to paste the asset pack name. And once the code has been finished, you can go ahead and load up the geometry inside Houdini. You can see if you have loaded entirety of the geometry, you can go to the detail attribute. You can see we have written a detail attribute called asset pack and the name of the asset pack that we saved our geometry from. And this basically covers the tool in its entirety. And remember, if your naming scheme for the assets in your content browser is a little bit different than the mine from these asset packs, you can always test your regular expression inside regex 101 and you can try to match your geometry and get some groups and attributes for the PDG naming of this geometry with the different regular expressions, so it doesn't have to be hard. So since this is not really hard coded to any specific regular expression. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching and see you next time.